All right, Fat Boys, this is your Week 10 in review. Just before we get to the actual NFL and our matchups, a quick thanks for those who sent me a nice message. Not everyone knew I was doing this, but I can now confirm I was watching Week 10 football while lying in bed in Athens and recovering a little bit. The beer was helping, but I can confirm for those who have any conspiracy theorist out there that Marathon in the Town is exactly 42 and change from the stadium in Athens. And if you ever decide to run it, just do some hill training. That's I'll just leave it at that. So while I was achingly recovering in bed, I got to watch some interesting matchups. I was pretty excited for so many games to come down to the wire, which I'll get to in a minute. One thing, just in case you're the kind of person that watches the beginning, fast forwards to your end part, just one thing to remind. Pay attention to the trade deadline of the league. I believe it's this weekend. We don't make a lot of trades in this league anyway, but hey, maybe we just start now. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to shout that one out. Now let's get on to our Week 10 NFL in review. Week 10 was in the books. It was an exciting one, not just because I ran until everything hurt and then tried to watch as much football as I could while also maybe enjoying an adult beverage or two. So my memories might be a little foggy, but even looking back, the amount of games that were exciting came down to last possession. In fact, 7 different games came down to our field goal kicker. 8 different field goals if you count Denver and Buffalo twice, which obviously if you were watching the game, you know what I'm talking about. Kudos to Russell Wilson. He brought the 12th man from the stands in Seattle and somehow got him to be on the field in Buffalo. Quick side tangent on that one. If you've been sending me comments or liking, subscribing, whatever, it is super helpful. I love seeing that people like this. Some people have been sending me personal comments. I did get a couple last week asking, what exactly did you cut out in your Arthur Smith rant when you ranted for so long anyway? I hear you. I'll circle back to that at a later date. I'll try and include that. But it is interesting with coaching staffs. I mean, one of the things that I can point to with Arthur Smith, and I already did, his win-loss record over the last couple of years has not been fantastic, and yet he is still a coach. So obviously he is meeting Atlanta's expectations. I say this because Buffalo's offensive coordinator was the scapegoat and apparently was not meeting their expectations and was just let go. I don't think you can blame him for all the reckless interceptions from Josh Allen because he's always done that. But you probably can blame him for having the 12th person, or at least someone had to. So he went down for that one. That aside, with those many close games, we saw a few things that I wanted to point out before we move on to our matchups. One, we saw a few classics, so some things that I think are vintage. Number one, it was great to see Jameis Winston out there. I don't want to get into his problematic personal life, but him as an NFL quarterback in this league just brings joy. He is reckless. It's like he's on bath salts. I don't understand how he thinks he can make every throw. He makes some of the most horrific interceptions you're going to see, but then comes up with some superhero touchdowns. I know Olave's probably a fan, so it's fun to see him on the field again. Sad that it was at an injured quarterback's expense, but they get a bye week in New Orleans, so who knows. Another very classic Keenan Allen game, if you were watching. Yes, you could read a stat line, 11 catches, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, but if you were watching the game, I think he went out of the emergency tent at least 3 times. That, to me, is the key of a classic Keenan Allen game. We're seeing Pittsburgh going back to form. This is their second time in the last 3 or 4 years where they've had a team that nobody is scared of, nobody considers good, and yet they're poised to make the playoffs. They have as many wins as they do touchdown passes, and yet somehow they're just winning games. I think another classic for me would just be look at the anemic offense of the Jets. Sorry, New York fans, I know you were hoping for something different with Rodgers, and we'll see how that goes. Apparently, he's against vaccinations, but not against other medical treatment to try and get him to recover faster, or maybe his injury wasn't as bad. We'll put that aside because right now the Jets offense is anemic at best. 23 total field goals this year and 10 touchdowns. So if you don't have the field goal kicker from the Jets, I don't blame you because 23 is okay, but there's other teams that have more field goals. But the 10 touchdowns, yee. I think as well, the other position I would want to highlight, Netflix did a great job of pointing out some of our best. Now, Mariota, not so much, but they were showing the journeyman and Cousins and obviously Mahomes. We're getting a whole different quarterback experience this year, though. Number one, and I'm saving some of these stats. I'm going to do something near the end of the year just for overall trends, etc. about the year. But if you were paying attention, as of right now, heading into week 11, Josh Dobbs in most standard quarterback scoring fantasy systems has more points than Patrick Mahomes. Unreal. He wasn't even supposed to start. It wasn't a given that he was going to start. So, and now he essentially lost his job to the quarterback coming back, gets traded, doesn't miss a week, and just keeps on. So we'll see how fast that goes. But I think in general, most of the quarterbacks have had up and downs. Like Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback in most scoring systems, but has had horrible weeks, including this past one. Josh Allen lost a lot of people their leagues. I can testify to at least one of those situations by throwing so many picks. And remember, if you're actually watching the game, he had a pick overturned. It could have been even worse. But the classic I would love to point out is I've been kind of dropping them occasionally, but just to give you maybe a cheap sheet, we have the potential for more interesting quarterback nicknames than I think we ever have. Now, the last couple of weeks in Chicago, unfortunately, not unfortunately, I think Fields is coming off and he might be back this week, or certainly if not this week, next. His replacement being Teabag, I've been using that for the last couple of weeks. I'm pretty happy with that one. Las Vegas have an AOC. I think that's a phenomenal nickname. Doesn't actually translate to either one of those people very well, but well done there. Very big into Tennessee, now starting the rookie. Billy Jeans, fantastic. Can't even make that up. The Jets, when it's tough, because Zach Wilson gets made fun of a lot, let us not forget what he was first famous for and his first mini controversy of being a mother lover or a mother's friend's lover, but mother lover is a better nickname. Indy, I've always called him the golden mustache, even though it's dark. I don't care. It's a beautiful mustache. I don't want to hear anything about it. The Washington C words, maybe not really a great nickname with Sling and Sammy Howell, but I like it. It rolls off the tongue quite nicely. I've heard some call, I don't really know Game of Thrones, but Littlefinger from Pittsburgh. I think it's just because he's got small hands. I don't know if that was actually a character trait. I think it's just really Pickett's got small mitts. One of the weirder ones, because we currently have the starting quarterback for the New York Football Giants, who I've already mentioned, the Goodfellas reference. So it's hard. Joe Pesci can't be a nickname when your name is Tommy DeVito. You go by Tommy DeVito. But there's got to be something here. He still lives with his mom. And as someone from Italian descent, a quarter Italian, move out, man. You're a starting quarterback. Just don't meet that mid-30s Italian man living with his mom. Break the trend. Let's move out. And of course, like I mentioned, it's good to see Kyler Murray back. Saw some references from being called to duty. If you know his video game history, if not, take a quick Google. It's a fun bit. He doesn't believe in film, just playing video games. And Call of Duty, he's apparently quite addicted to. Can't make this up. He comes back on the week that the new game is actually released. I also can't shake it. Some people that I follow, Craig Holovitz, or Horvath, sorry, from Fantasy Football Pod, did point this out. And now that I say it, if you don't want Kyler Murray wrecked for you, don't listen to this part, but he referenced this about a year ago, how when Kyler Murray scrambles, he's running like a 2-year-old toddler who stole your cell phone. Just watch it. Tell me what you think. I can't get it out of my head. The last, and maybe the most controversial, because it is a bit of a theory. It is certainly not something we can prove. Same group of people in that podcast point out that maybe Goff can't poop on the road. He might be a nervous pooper. The reason is he's always been horrible on the road, but great at home. And yet he just had the greatest road game of all time. But it's because it was back in Los Angeles and he owns a house close by. So maybe he could poop in his own bathroom, and that's what made him have a great game. Could you imagine if that's been holding him back all these years, is he's just so uncomfortable on the road that he can't go to the bathroom? So, making the American Pie reference and shit break has got to be something that sticks if we can ever prove that. Either way, Week 10, eventful for other reasons, which we're going to get to. A lot of interesting touchdowns and thread lines, but that's going to be more for our matchups. Looking ahead to Week 11, we got a pretty exciting one, and I hope people are looking forward to actually watching this one. Now, bye weeks, you do have to be cautious of Atlanta, Indy, New England, and New Orleans. Not quite the bye-a-palooza that last week was. But one of the most exciting things, I'm going to miss being in North America this week because the night games are actually quite interesting. You got Cincy at Baltimore, which is a decent Thursday night game, especially if you consider the last couple. In fact, the AFC North is playing each other as well, so Pittsburgh, Cleveland during the day on Sunday should be good. Couple decent ones, couple good matchup games. You got the ones that could be quite pivotal and all that, but the night one of Minnesota at Denver, it's not exactly two teams I would love to watch, but you can't tell me that you know what's going to happen in that game. After what Dobbs has been doing in Minnesota, and then Denver just took down Buffalo, legitimately anything can happen. But obviously the big game on Monday night for actual football fans, repeat of last year's Super Bowl, Philadelphia, Kansas City, going to feel pretty crappy that I can't watch those ones. But as I say, let's wait for Week 11. We'll get excited in a minute. First, let's take a look at what happened in Week 10 fantasy-wise. After getting the short end of the stick several times this year, Whalen bounces back with our number one performance of the week, just shy of 150. How did it go down? Now, he was not without his upset issues or his underperformances. Etienne, who's been a stud all year, no bueno. Ridley, this has kind of been what he does. He's either on or he's off. We'll talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars probably a little bit more when we get to another team. But aside from that, everyone was more than suitable for me. He had a couple number ones. Dak was our quarterback. One, not surprisingly, that's a monster output, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then one more by his feet, because if they give Pollard too much attention, apparently he'll die this year. I don't know what it is, where they just literally everybody on the Dallas team overperformed, ... except who he was playing against. So Whalen must have been pretty pumped about that. TJ Hawkinson was also our tight end one. And then when it comes to his running backs, he's got to be real pleased with Williams and Eckler coming through like they did. Adam looked like a person again. And Pittsburgh's D was just outside of our top echelon, but he did quite well. In terms of the defense, that was one of the things that Mark had going for him. That was their defense one, I believe, was San Francisco. So well done there. And also shutting down Etienne, that must have felt good. But Billie Jean here didn't do so well. Finally, Bijan was let out of the Dijon container, but not enough to really make a difference. Now, he also left our running back 5 on his bench in Montgomery. Didn't trust him coming back. Not a lot of people knew exactly how Gibbs and him would work. Turns out in that game, everything worked. Chargers, Lions, if you had one in your lineup, you were probably happy. They managed to make both running back fantasy owners pretty pumped, both him and Gibbs. So, unfortunate, Mark, your skid continues. I think you called your shot a bit early on your dynasty. You're still spending all our money from the last couple of years, so no one's really crying for you here. We could also really use you to really tank next week. Just throwing it out there unbeknownst to anything. We'll get to that one later. But, John, not out of it yet, buddy, and you know it. This league is quite tight. Every win's going to matter, so keep on. You get a little bit of a winning streak here. Let's see what happens. So, best of luck heading into Week 11. In clearly what exists as cousin collusion, B came on top of the cousin battle here. I say that because, man, Chaz, flex spot. Then we look down. You had a bear, too. A bear. Wouldn't have mattered. Brendan, you had a great week, and I'm super pumped I didn't play you this week because I think you beat me by like a point, and I would have been super pissed had that happened. But you did break Chaz's win streak. He had a couple in a row there. He was looking on fire. Unfortunately, Chaz, not only did you leave someone in with the bye, but you actually just receivers underperforming. Burrow did fine, obviously. And Gibbs, as I mentioned in the previous matchup, he was actually our running back 2 with Monty being our running back 5. So Detroit found a way to show everybody some love. Who knows if that's going to keep going into next week. Speaking of running backs, though, Brendan, the other B. Robinson was our running back 1, Brian Robinson, crushing it for you right now. And Goff, as I mentioned, broke his poop streak there, and shit break was fine because he could take a dump in his own house. But also, I think you're probably more impressed with, weirdly enough, 36 points and our wide receiver 2. Not even our wide receiver 1, but CeeDee Lamb did quite well for you. Combine that with other people that were treading water. That was more than enough. The Jets obviously got you some points. But this is probably the most impressive part. This was a massive bye week, and we'll get to someone else who was on a bye week this week, bye week/injury week. You had a very similar situation. There was no one home in your bench, so well done there to pull it through. You found the replacements that you needed, and if I'm not mistaken, Fields is looking right now. He is trending towards starting in Week 11. Might put you in a battle here to see who you're going to go with. Obviously, 2 NFC North quarterbacks. So let's see what you ride with Week 11, which is going to be important because, like I said, you've right now got that last playoff spot, and the other teams in the league will be hunting you down. So best of luck, B. Congratulations. And Chaz, not over yet, buddy. Just bounce back. Who knows, another 3-game winning streak later, and this could all be behind you. I mentioned I'd have been pissed if I played B less than a point, really. That would have really thrown me off. And actually, I'm pretty happy because Underhill, I was watching this, and as I mentioned, I'm lying in, after I got back from some post-marathon drinks in Athens, I was lying with my legs feeling all kinds of weird. And I was watching this, and at one point in time, I remember rolling over in this matchup making me sick because it looked like I was going to lose by like 50. It's because my quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, sucked against San Francisco. My then quarterback, who knows? Week 11. Maybe there'll be a change. Maybe there was already a waiver wire pickup. Who knows what I'll end up doing. But I had a real slow start, and you kind of came out and were looking pretty good. And then the tides turned. Now, for you, Kittle held on at least. I think that's got to be helpful. He was our tight end, too. Dallas obviously putting up some points. Not what you maybe want from them now that we know they can score 20 or 30. That might be what you're expecting. And then your kicker doubling. I mean, he was in our top 5 for kickers. He, in fact, was our only kicker that made the top 5 list that people took. Every other kicker who was kicking game-winning field goals were not actually taken. Hill finally bit you on the tight end front, and everyone else kind of underperformed. Whereas for me, I was super lucky. I think I literally had everybody but Trevor Lawrence exceed their predicteds. Now, maybe Dalton Schultz, just the person I picked up for the week to get over Kelsey's bye week. We can talk about karma. I know there's a joke to be made there. But instead, I'll just say he at least did what he should be doing, as did my kicker Dicker. But everybody else did great for me. I had Walker and Kamara that kind of snapped a little bit. Walker especially came back. He was our running back 4. St. Brown was our wide receiver also 4. Apparently I was golfing this week. And Olave woke up as soon as Jameis came in, so I was pretty happy about that. In terms of our bench, I also had some bye weeks and some injuries. You did leave some points on the bench. Wouldn't have been enough, but would have been nice. Would have made it a bit tighter, but that just means you got some potential for next week. Don't worry, though. You still have the second spot in our pool. You're still doing quite well overall, but let's not get too complacent because we're all gunning for you in these top spots. After a big week like that, I was hoping that I was in the playoffs. I'm still outside in, so I'll be hungry coming into next week, as will everyone else. So, Justin, hopefully you bounce back and have a better week 11. I mentioned last week this was going to be a tough one for you, Horst, with your bye-a-palooza going on. You made some adjustments. You still have some people on your bench hurt or bye because obviously you don't want to get rid of your Eagle contingent, and we're hoping Jefferson might be back this week. Unfortunately for you, all the moves that you made weren't quite enough. V held you off. You do have your CJ for MVP campaign that is going louder than you think it would for a rookie. Everyone else, did fine. And some underperformances, especially in Cotton here. But really what you bumped into was Will, who had some players ready to go. He had Herbert, who was our quarterback 2, only really falling short to Dax, who just went off. 30 normally for us would have been a quarterback 1 performance. 2 wide receivers. Evans was our wide receiver 5, so you can see Chase was only 1.4 off being our wide receiver 6, potentially. I actually think he was. You've got to be a little disappointed in your New Orleans defense, Will. I think going against the Dobbs stopper, you would have assumed that they maybe would have picked up a couple picks, but he's been just kind of dancing on clouds. And your running backs were, the last couple weeks they've been things to help you out, so it's good to know you have multiple ways how to win. Now, don't cry too much, gentlemen. Well, Will's not crying. He got the win. He's pretty happy. 5 and 6 wins right now is enough to put you in the top 6, so you are in the playoffs. In fact, if the league ended this week, this would be the first round matchup that you both would be bumping into. So if you would like that to happen, keep treading water and doing what you're doing. But you're probably going to want to keep pushing. Will keep the momentum going, and Horst snap back from a week that you knew that was going to be tough. As I mentioned, there's a lot of us that are only shy by a win or 2 and point differential, etc. So we're still gunning for you, and we're still going after these spots. So guard them well. So I wish you the best of luck as both of you head into week 11. In what we thought was going to be the knockdown, drag-out matchup of our top 2 of our top seeds, it was fine. Actually, technically, it was our closest matchup. We had no close matchups this week. Nothing came down. Not unlike the NFL, where everything came down to the 3-point field goal or differential. This was 20 points and plus, and this was our closest one. So, Ben, you did stumble out of the gates here. Unfortunately, you did have some bye issues, obviously, you knew of. Look at the bench here between injuries and buys. You were empty house, so that being considered, to almost hit your predict on that stretch isn't too bad. I noticed you doubled down here on the Oklahoma connection of Murray and Brown and see if Hollywood could go. And actually, I haven't done the math on this completely. You were close to winning this matchup. I don't know if you know how realistic that was. I believe it was a 50-plus yard touchdown throw that was just overthrown. Brown was open. It was just the connection wasn't there. I know ifs and buts, candy nuts, but had they hit that and you got double the points and it was a long touchdown like that, and I think if it was over 51 yards in the end, that would have put Murray above the 300-point threshold, so you get a bump. I think that all considered may have been enough to do it, or at least it would have been darn close. So unlucky for you on that one. I know sometimes that's a good strategy to try and pick a combo on a week where you got those buys you have to cover. Fortunately for you, you get your quarterback 1. You might get one of these, well, not him, but you might get another running back next week. I've heard, maybe. Let's see. And Mahomes obviously is coming back, which you got to be happy about. In their stead, you did have enough to get by. Now, McCaffrey did lose his touchdown consecutive streak little run he had going, and man, you got to be sweating it. He had 75% snap rate, and actually, if you were watching that game, they were up by 30. No starters were in of the major skill positions, and they were still giving McCaffrey the ball 4 times in a row to try and get him that touchdown. So you can't tell me they weren't looking at stats, and you were probably pumped at the idea, but I don't know, man. I mean, a win this week is great, but I'd want McCaffrey come playoff time, so let's hope that they keep him safe. For Jake, you only made one mistake, and you know what it is. Tight end, baby. Come on. Put yourself in. Don't put yourself on the bench. No one puts Jake in a corner. Also, Najee kind of helped you out, but your running backs did just fine. White has been great for you, and Taylor, he got a touchdown, and he's still kind of getting back to form, so you got to be pretty pumped about that. Lamar Jackson, a bit of a looser game than you may have wanted, but you had Keenan Allen, which was our wide receiver one in a really wide receiver heavy week. 175 yards and a couple of touchdowns, 11 catches. Can't sneeze at that one. Baltimore's defense also did round out our top 5. They were our 5th rated defense, so congrats on that one. And like I said, you did have some options on the bench, and with Tyreek Hill coming back next week, my assumption is there's going to be some support coming in for some people who got you through the week. So you managed, tough matchup, 2 top people in our league. Jake, you took him down. You remain our number 1 seed, and you look like you got a little bit of a gap ahead of you here, so got to be pretty pleased about that. As I mentioned, the big news, we had a 3-way tie for first that now is a 1-way not tie for first, with the other 2 falling, and that coming down to just a hella tight point differential. We do have Kevin alone at 4. Then we start getting tight with the 5 wins and me just outside with 4. So next couple weeks, I keep saying it, but we know it. It's going to get tight. Even don't, Mark's going to throw it to me, so I'll hopefully get to, I'm just joking. Please just let me beat Mark. But we do have some people here on the outside that are trying to get in, and it's not too late. So let's take a look at our Week 11 matchups. As I mentioned, I'm really hoping Mark is nice because it looks like I might have some bye issues. In fact, I know I have some bye issues. Can Waylon keep the run going and kick Ben while he's down? Can Chaz get his new streak started against the other person who failed to keep up with Jake? Let's see. We do have a couple really key league matchups, though. 1 versus 4, 2 teams right now in the playoffs, and they want to keep it that way. Speaking of which, 2 other teams hanging on to the edge of the playoffs in B versus V. We got the battle of the continents. Could have a huge swing, obviously. Every win is important, but especially when you're hanging on to those last 2 playoff spots. So let's see how it goes. Pretty excited about the week in general now that my stuff is done and I can focus on a Sunday and not have my legs be numb. Do remember we don't have any more European trips, so I think in terms of scheduling, we're set. I know we're heading into another week next week that's a little bit funky, the week after this in terms of scheduling, but Week 11 is a standard one. As I said, some really good night matchups, so those of you in North America, I am envious. Those of you in Far East Asia, I'm also probably envious because you might get a chance to watch those games. Looks like some good ones. In the meantime, for the rest of us, we'll keep up as we always do. So, gentlemen, we're getting close. Let's keep paying attention, and best of luck as we head into Week 11.